So, welcome back to Tokyo PM. Today, I wanted to take the opportunity to address the question of do you need Japanese when you're trying to be a PM here in Japan? Now, admittedly, the core base of trying to work in Japan is you will need to know Japanese to some extent, unlike maybe the North American market, which is obviously in English, or the European market. For example, I'm half Dutch, and in the Netherlands, everyone can speak English because the Netherlands is quite small as a country. And so you need to be able to have a shared language across country borders that allows business to be done. But Japan is big enough of a market in itself that you find that a lot of people don't assume that English is necessary to do business. That is not to say that Japan is isolated or insulated in any way. There are definitely Japanese companies that look to operate at a global scale. But when you're looking at startups or where you're looking at small companies or even relatively large companies, there's no core foundation of let's operate in English. Unlike the Netherlands, as an example, they don't see, oh, we should learn English to improve our business prospects or just to improve our cross border exchange because the domestic market is big enough to sort of sustain everyone only operating in Japanese. When it comes to working as a PM, it can be difficult to operate without Japanese. So when you're at the execution stage, which is generally someone who's just started being a PM or has just joined a company, they would be expected to work together with the developers and the engineers to say, hey, how do we ship this product? How do we ship this feature and get it out to customers? Now, a lot of companies are starting to look at outsourcing their engineers. So rather than in house teams, they would have teams based in other regions, such as India or the Philippines, which has very high skilled engineers. And there you end up with a little bit of a language barrier if you can only speak Japanese. And so there are PMs that work in the execution stage, which Japanese is less required because the hope is that you would be able to directly work together with the engineers to ship a feature. Now, where this gets challenging is if you're expected to speak to stakeholders. When you're speaking with stakeholders, it's no guarantee that everyone can speak English. And you find a range of companies that have a different solution to this problem. So you have some companies where they would hire specifically someone who can speak both English and Japanese in a PM role. And in doing so, there's the expectation that they would be able to both communicate with the engineers directly, but then also be able to speak to stakeholders, executives, sales and marketing team, for example, in Japanese to a business degree that would allow for smooth communication across the two sections of the company. You have other companies that are really making a push to improve their inclusiveness and to try to remove the language barrier that not knowing Japanese causes. And so there are different approaches being taken. The place that I work, Mercari, I think is doing an incredible job in this space because one of the things that they've done is hire translators. And these translators, they would sit in on meetings and they would actively translate and help facilitate the meetings in English or in Japanese. And so when you're looking at not only company-wide meetings where, everyone maybe has an all hands once a month, and that has to be done in both languages, they have a dedicated team to help cater to the individual meetings to make sure that the language barrier does not become an issue. Does this slow down meeting progress sometimes? Yes, of course. But it's worth taking the effort to make sure that everyone who needs to be included in the conversation is included and get to the result that you're looking to get to as a team. So one way is to have translators. The second way is some companies are sponsoring Japanese education. So let's say you are moving to Japan and you trying to get a job here at a company in Japan. Some of them will offer Japanese classes as part of your compensation, as part of your incentives to join that company. And why this is good is you get the opportunity to improve your Japanese, which will not only help professionally, but also help in your day to day while living in Japan. Is it possible to live in Japan without a word of Japanese? Yes. I have many friends who don't speak Japanese, and you are able to function. I think the biggest issue is kind of city hall when you need to do paperwork. But other than that, depending on your ward, there are city halls that do have paperwork in English. And so there is an effort to improve that aspect. But generally, you can function without Japanese, but then your sphere of exposure would be limited to those who speak English, which is admittedly a very small percentage of those that live in Japan. And so if you do get Japanese classes offered by your company, it's worth looking at. One caveat though, it depends on your Japanese proficiency on if they're offered or not. So often companies, they will offer maybe basic level 1, level 2 Japanese classes as part of your package. But let's say you're already at a level 3 and you're looking to move to senior PM. And to be a senior PM, you need level 4, level 5. It's worth asking them, do they also offer class subsidies to do level 4, level 5 Japanese classes? Now, when you're the head of product, so now we're looking at, let's say you're an associate PM or you're new PM and your main responsibility is execution. You can look at needing Japanese, maybe when talking with stakeholders, but if your primary responsibility is to create maybe product requirement documents and share that with the engineers, that can all be done in English. Your internal team product documentation can also be done in English. But when you're expected to start sharing these with stakeholders and start managing different requests coming from different places, which is shifting from maybe associate entry level to junior PM, where you start working with other teams, then the Japanese level becomes a more required, and this will carry through as you go into senior PM. Now, when you're looking at head of PM, these are roles that I don't have experience in myself, so I can't say with certainty. But these are roles that there's two approaches. Either the company will outright say, yes, you need Japanese ability because we expect you to be the face of the company and we expect you to be able to communicate with everyone. And so a Japanese is necessary outright. Now, this is an approach, but this is limiting in the sense that there's a lot of incredible talent that is then being left out by a language barrier. Not easy to learn Japanese. Any English speaker is trying to learn Japanese. It's kind of like on the opposite end of the language spectrum. So it makes it very tough to learn. And so by saying you need Japanese outright for someone who's trying to achieve such a senior role can limit really good talent. And so another approach similar to what is being done for senior level roles or junior level roles is that heads of PMs would then have a translator or would then have someone who can help facilitate that in discussion. And why this would be good is especially if a company is trying to expand their product overseas. This gives them the opportunity to say, hey, we have, head of product, very global presence, but can still cater to the domestic market here in Japan. And this is important because Japan can seem like an island. Well, it is an island geographically, but it can seem culturally like an island, which runs counter to the fact that a lot of our business is overseas. We export things to the US, we export things to Europe. We have huge influence in Southeast Asia and we invest in Vietnam, we invest in Indonesia, and we're putting a lot of money and a lot of business into countries that don't operate in Japanese. And so being in a position where you can operate with such sway without Japanese ability, I think is just going to become more and more common. As of now, my biggest recommendation would be if you're just joining as a PM or if you're looking to get a job, studying Japanese doesn't hurt. It's worth trying to do some practice, trying to be able to get at least to a conversational level. Literacy is not as important because, of course, you've got, Google Translate, you've got DeepL Translate, and these are incredible resources you can use to translate your emails. But if you're in a meeting, it can get a little bit difficult. And so my recommendation would be for meetings, you want to be able to get your Japanese up to a conversational level. So joining these Japanese classes are really good. if you're looking for reading, I will share an example that I think is really good, and that's called Wanikani. We would be using Wanikani. Now, I will admit I have fallen behind, so I have a lot of reviews to do. But the nice thing with Wanikani is it uses a spaced repetition system, which means that as you're learning, it will bring the kanji back to you. And so let's say you learn a new kanji, then in 6 hours it will give you the same kanji, then in 12 hours it will give you the same kanji, and then in 24 hours it will give you the same kanji, and it will repeat this 6 or 7 times before you get to the point of mastery. And the reason behind this is it helps you retain the kanji. And for me personally, kanji is my biggest weak point when it comes to Japanese. Growing up, I did learn a little bit of Japanese conversationally, so I can speak it and I can understand it to an extent. But my kanji is really poor, and because my kanji is poor, my vocabulary is poor. And so my recommendation is using something like Wanikani that will allow you to improve your skill. Now, the way that it works, you have lessons, and each lesson will show you the kanji, what the English word means, and then sort of the components of the kanji. And this is when you're already at a kanji level. If you're looking at the basics, it will teach you each word, like exit itself. And then you can learn, what does exit mean, which is shutsu in onyomi, and then you also have kunyomi or nannori, but that's for later. And so this is a really easy way to spend 10 minutes every morning kind of going through your kanji. And this way you can see that you can slowly keep learning more and more kanji as you go. I'm only on level 7, so still a long way to go, but it's a really good way to skill up in Japanese. And once you can read, then it unlocks so much more avenue for conversation, which you wouldn't have otherwise. So it makes a very big difference to focus on reading, trying to be able to communicate, and this will speed up your learning where you're not waiting for the chance to have a conversation with someone, which of course is a worthwhile skill, but that's a skill that I think you will see greater returns focusing on reading as an initial investment in your Japanese journey. Now, if you're looking to work on your conversational ability, I personally attend Koto Language School, COTO Language School, and this is based in Shibuya. They just opened a new shop, and it's also based in Kudayoshita, which is just north of the Imperial Palace. And they are the only school that I found that actually does evening classes. They do evening classes both remotely or in person. My recommendation would be in person, because that way you're actually joining a fellow cohort of students that are trying to learn to improve together. And I highly recommend them. I've been using them for 2 years now, and they've taken me from in 3 in terms of the Japanese language proficiency test up to maybe trying to pass into. I'm working on it, and it's a little bit difficult, but they brought me up to that level. So I think Koto is definitely worth the investment if you're looking to improve your Japanese. It'll be a commitment, it'll be hard, but if you see yourself being in Japan for at least 3 years, if not more, it's worth, really trying to dig your teeth into the language. And you'll find it helps not just in your work, but you'll be able to bring this experience with you when you're just operating out in the world. If you have friends that are coming to visit and you want to take them to places and show them, I live here, I'm engaging with Japan. It's something that is a skill that's definitely worth investing into. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.